Good evening. Due to this, I think, heavy traffic and little bit of drizzle, I think a lot of our members and others, they are a little stuck. So they will be joining us very soon. So let me give a warm welcome to Shri Yatin Patel, Deputy Consul General of India, Mr. Professor Pedro Videla, respected IBPC and ICI members, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to extend a warm welcome to every one of you. Both at IBPC Dubai and Institute of Companies Secretaries of India, we believe in fostering collaboration, innovation and continuous learning to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of international business. Whether you are a seasoned industry veteran or just starting your journey, our platforms provide a wealth of resources, networking opportunities and insights to help you to thrive professionally. This evening, we have with us an eminent economist, Professor Pedro Videla, who will share his valuable insight with us. May I now request, he heads the advisory practices. Mr. Lakshmanan is a postgraduate in commerce, professionally qualified chartered accountant, cost accountant and company secretary from India, and completed the global CEO program conducted by Wharton, USA, IESE, Spain and CEIBS, China. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Mr. Lakshmanan.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Eid Mubarak. For those of you who celebrated Eid just about a few days ago. It gives me immense pleasure amidst an august audience, His Excellency Yatin Patel, Deputy Consul General of India to UAE, distinguished guests of IBPC and Institute of Company Secretaries of India UAE chapter, and to welcome from the ESC fraternity Professor Pedro Videla, Noel and Spella. I have a unique distinction today of wearing three hats. One is as the Chairman of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India and a member of the IBPC, and as well as the alumni of ESC Barcelona, where I did the Global CEO program way back in 2013. Professor Pedro Videla had taught me at the Global CEO program, and he has been teaching for the last 30 years, and he heads the economics department at the university there, and he has done a number of programs across the world with various universities. And when we were informed that Professor Videla is coming here, I rang up the chairman of IBPC, Suresh Kumarji, and said, can we do a joint event with IBPC and ICSI, the first joint event together? And the way the world economy is currently moving, with all the tensions happening, especially the recent ones, last couple of days, we thought it would be good to get some insights on this topic from Professor Pedro Videla, who has traveled across the globe and delivered numerous lectures. And Suresh Kumarji immediately said, why not, let's do it. It's right after the Eid holidays. So that's a bit of this thing on 15th, the first working day. But nevertheless, let's do it. And then Sahitra Saturvedi, Secretary General got involved, and Amitava. We put together a plan today to do this. I'm very happy to see the large crowd to hear the economic insights. Initially, Professor Videla said that, should I speak about India? There are a lot of people here who probably know much more about Indian economy, especially with the current elections on. But he has agreed that he will speak some parts about India, the Middle East, and especially, I think with the current set of crisis in the Middle East, we were not even sure whether he will land up in Dubai today, because yesterday he was stuck in Jordan after he landed from Madrid into Jordan for about 20 hours or so, and with all the drones flying I think he managed to reach here safe and amidst us. So thank you, Professor Pedro, for taking your time and efforts to reach here and deliver. So with those few words, I would like to thank IBPC and the ICSI that this collaboration opportunities, doing more programs for the benefit of the members. We would like to continue doing that. And thank you, Your Excellencies and other members, distinct members, for coming here today. Thank you very much.
For your kind words. May I now request Shri Yatin Patel, Deputy Consul General and Consul, to address the gathering. Mr. Yatin Patel.
Good evening, dignitaries of IBPC, ICSI, Professor Videla, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure again to take a floor in IBPC event, and I can never say no to any IBPC invitation. Friends, we have been living in a very uncertain times. The confluence of uncertainties have been casting a long shadow on our collective future. I would narrate an age-old wisdom that used to be so very true for centuries in Gujarat, particularly in Saurashtra region of Gujarat. There was a saying that, one kandi, which is like 400 kg, one kandi of groundnut price would always go hand in hand with price of 1 tola of gold, 10 grams of gold. So that used to be one, sort of age-old wisdom, that 400 kg of groundnut price and 10 grams of gold prices would be somewhat similar. That's not the case anymore. I mean, for last 20 years, that hasn't been true. The wisdom that served our forefathers for years is no longer true. In fact, right now, the prices of gold, as you all know, they have skyrocketed, and it's like 3.5 times the kandi price. I'm not sure whether the prices of groundnut can ever catch with gold anymore. So these are uncertain times. Now, what has been causing this kind of uncertainties in the world? There might be many reasons, and all of them might be true, but if we highlight few of them, like geopolitical tensions, like the crisis that has been happening in our neighborhood. So those kind of crises, they have been disrupting supply chains, they have been dampening the confidence of investors. So yes, they have been affecting us. Then there are inflationary pressures. We know that the prices are really very high. It has been eroding purchasing power of people, and many of the countries are looking at the risk of stagflation. Then we have climate change. Extreme weather events have been disrupting production, distribution, causing disruption in supply chains, all those things. And then there are technological breakthroughs, which has been causing structural reforms all around. I mean, we all have been living in the age of artificial intelligence. While it would add to the productivity, but we are not sure that those who can't adapt or can't catch up with that, how certain or uncertain their future is. So there are factors which are causing all sort of uncertainties in this world. Now the only certain thing is we can't tackle with this in isolation. There has to be engagement. There has to be confluence, and that has to happen on multiple layers. There has to be international cooperation where we can work together for rule-based world order, where we can work for de-escalation of tension, where we can request or ask for restraint. So there has to be international cooperation. There has to be public-private partnership, because neither government or nor private sector can deal with the changes and uncertainties on their own. So there has to be that confluence also. And then there has to be inclusive dialogue. The civil societies, the academias, and all the other entities, they need to come together so that the ideas can be exchanged. So this event is a special one because it's providing us opportunity to have that kind of engagement where public sector, private sector, academia, experts, they all are coming together. So if we need to navigate the uncertainties and If we are hopeful of building, resilient global economy, this kind of events, this kind of engagement, dialogue is must. On this hopeful note, I surrender the floor. Once again, I take this opportunity to thank our organizers, IBPC and ICSI, for providing me platform, and I look forward to listen to Professor Videla. As I mentioned, that exchange of ideas, dialogue is very much necessary. So, Professor, looking forward to hear you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your valuable address. May I now request Dr. Sahitya Chaturvedi, Secretary General of IBPC Dubai, to address the gathering. Dr. Sahitya Chaturvedi, a fellow chartered accountant from India and also from England and Wales, is a PhD and head of retail accounts and finance at Ajmal Perfumes Group. He has a diverse portfolio in finance management and business leadership in retail operation at several small to medium and large enterprises internationally, across businesses of lifestyle, luxury, FMCG, textile, real estate, education, medicine and investment. Ladies and
good evening, salam, namaskar, and many more occasions this evening are joining together. Not only the seasons, the seasoned professionals and the seasoned professor is with us today. In fact, in the Middle East, if we look into after Ramadan, after this Eid, is almost as like as new beginning of the year. And this time, the financial year, the April has started. So that is one side, the beginning. And the people who follow from the Indian culture and ancient conventions, the new year has just been celebrated a week back. We are so glad, humble, and honored to have Mr. Professor Pedro Videla over here. A big round of applause for Professor, please. We all know that we are gathered today for the global economic outlook. At the lighter note, if I recollect my pre-college days, when we were used to learn the definitions of economics, or the currency, the money. Money is what, Mr. Makwana? Money does, right? If we look into the economics definition, there is a famous proverb that if there are 6 economists, they are meeting together, the definition is not 1. Even the definitions are not 2 or 3, even not 6. The definitions are 7. This is the proverb, famous proverb, sir. Please forgive me for that. That's why, keeping that in mind, we invited a single economist today. And in the forum of company secretaries. Sorry to say that when the opinions are varying from one to other, one scholar to other about economics, when it comes to, I will not say chartered accountants, but yes, when we quote as company secretaries, I don't think the opinions are varying, because we are following, company secretaries are following the compliances, and that's where opinion is no 2. It is always 1. And here, the professor is 1, and the professionals are many. So let's look into the money matters, the money opinion, not many, but the single, and from the seasoned professional. Thank you so much, sir. Please, I give the forum again, the mic again to our senior manager, Mr. Mitwa. Thank you. Yeah, I will like to mention the introduction, the brief introduction. Professor Pedro Videla is Head of Economics Department from Vanco, Chair of Emerging Markets. He is PhD in Economics from University of Chicago. He is MA, postgraduate in Economics, again from University of Chicago, and many more awards. And let's see the words and the wisdom from Professor today.
I think it's difficult to top that video, so I'll be very brief because I know that you have more interesting speakers. So I'll be brief in talking about IESE and His Excellency, distinguished guests. thank you for inviting us in behalf of YESE. We're happy to kind of briefly, I'll be talking briefly about YESE, and then of course, Professor Videla will be discussing more. So whenever I'm here in Dubai, I'm always surprised and by the, let's say, the dedication of this region in excellency in technology, education, and business, as well as being here, understanding that the importance of integrity, importance of transparency, and ease of doing business. Over and on top of that, of course, is volunteerism and human aid, and I'm sure it's a big part of that is from the Indian community and bringing in the idea of seva and here in this region. So at YESE, we kind of try to bring all these similar ideas with our students. So the idea of professional excellency, integrity, and spirit of service, so selfless service. So how YESE was born, just when the UAE was being conceived and of course finally established in 1971, YESE kind of also started with its MBA and later developed throughout the years, especially through the MBA program and later on the executive programs. As you can see here, as Harvard kind of supported YESE in the future or in the past, we've also contributed to a lot of schools in Africa as well as Latin America, and so kind of we're also YESE is kind of supporting and giving back. I mean, we say that we always say that we don't let rankings define us, and certainly not the most important thing, but hopefully it kind of shows a little bit of a testament of our excellence and what we're trying to strive for, especially with our programs and with our programs. Also here in this region is the internationalization and the dedication to, let's say, commitment to engagement, international engagement, and that's what we try to do here at YESE Business School. And we have, let's say, several campuses across, and also partner schools, as you can see here, and also across different alumni regions, including here in Dubai. Our kind of campuses across Europe and also in the US. And of course, with excellence, we work together with other business schools, including Harvard, MIT, and CEBS, to name a few. And of course, we have, to continue the excellence, we work closely with different communities, with our, let's say, Harvard YESE committee, for example. And the different programs that we have here at YESE, including the executive board, like how to be an effective board, and also for the CEO program that I'm sure, we've had alumni kind of talk about that. And to continue on with the excellence, of course, is the research and academic programs here at YESE. Very good. And then, not to mention, and just going through this quickly, of course, our partnership with several businesses across internationally, and also here in the region, and working closely with a lot of the companies here and supporting them, right? And very good. And so, I'll keep it short. The floor is yours, Professor Pedro. Thank you very much.
I now request Professor Pedro Videla to give his keynote address. His introduction has already been given by Dr. Saitya Chaturvedi, so I am not going to that route. Thank you, sir. May I now request Professor Pedro Videla to come up on stage for his keynote address.
Hello, good afternoon, members of IBCP, distinguished consul from India, Mr. Patel. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm really happy for this invitation. Unfortunately, we will have to talk about economics, and the situation in the world today is not the best, although we are in a region that is booming. But when we look at the rest of the world, the situation is pretty doubtful. So I'm planning to do this. I will talk roughly 30-40 minutes, and then we can have Q&A that will be more interesting to have a conversation about the issues. I will do like usually we do in economics. First, I will talk about what we call business cycle. So about what is improving in which region, what is going down in what region, and what are the characteristics that we see in the global economy today. And then I will talk more fundamental problems that we are facing. As Mr. Consul told us, we live in a world plenty of uncertainty. And this world of plenty of uncertainty comes from not only short-term problems that we are facing, but also for fundamental structural problems that we are facing in the future. No? So those are problems like, for example, we economists are out of the circles now because we tend to think in positive sum games. You have a drink, I have a sandwich, with exchange, we're both better off. That's why the way we think in economics. Now, the main thinking is geopolitics. The main thinking is, if you win, I lose. And that's the main thinking of the world, that we are in games that are of zero sum or negative sums. So now, you see, United States, they have election this year. And the election, you can see how split is the environment in United States. Even today, they are opening Pandora boxes that were closed long time ago. In 1973, were a decision of the Supreme Court in the United States, Roe versus Wade, that settled an issue very touchy like abortion. Discrimination was another issue that was settled. It was understood that in the United States there was a need to have some special policies to allow minorities to move forward. All those policies have been eradicated. And now the candidate to the presidency are talking about that. But there is one thing that everybody agree in the United States. Republicans, Democrats, everybody agree that they are in a Cold War with China. And we have to act given that Cold War. And this will have profound impacts in the future everywhere in the world. So those are the topics in the long run that will be affecting us. First, I want to address, as I said, business cycle. In 2020, the world economy start to be hit by profound negative shocks. The first one was the pandemic. And we have an impact there that we never saw in peacetime in the last 70 years. Here is what the IMF tells us about the pandemics. Here in the Great Recession in 2009, the world GDP per capita decreased in real terms almost 1%. And here we thought that the world was doing quite bad, because the previous year that we have a decline in the world GDP was 1938. So we didn't know about this. And then we have this shock and we have this profound shock here. And also, in the right-hand side here, the IMF tells us how many countries were in recession, in red. 90% of the world economy was in recession. So we have never seen a situation like this in peacetime. And the IMF is using the definition, the normal definition of recession. Countries that are 2 quarters in negative growth. But the country that was there known in recession because of that definition was China. But China was growing at 2%. If China grows at 2%, China is in recession. Because what is relevant is not if it's positive or negative, it's how far away I am from the potential growth. And China was at that time in recession. So the whole world was in recession. We had a huge shock. And many regions suffer more than others. No? Here you see what were the region that suffered the most. Latin America was the region that suffered the most for this in terms of GDP decline. No? You can see there that Africa was a region that didn't have that much. Asia, was a region that doesn't much that a decline, but we see that there was a profound. And also, this pandemic provide incredible data. You see here excess mortality by region, South America. And you see at the other end, Africa. Why? Because it was a pandemic that was really selected by age. So in younger population, the impact was much lower than in older population. That's how they have. South America has an older population and less ability to face this with medical assistance. The last thing that I will show about the pandemic, OECD just measured the excess mortality. OECD tried to say during 2020 and 2022, what was excess mortality with respect to what was previous that thing? And this is the data, which is incredible. The country that suffered the most was Chile in excess mortality. But here you see countries like Israel, they vaccinated 99% of the population. And look at the excess mortality. Canada, they closed the country on vaccination 99% of the population. Here you said, all these countries have it, which at the end is the country that have the slowest excess mortality? Sweden. What did they do? Nothing. So this is a data that if something that comes, we have to be aware of this thing, because maybe the way how we attack this problem, we have to rethink it. No, ex post is easy to do. At the moment we didn't know. At the moment we only have a paper from Imperial College in London that claimed that 2% of the people that were infected are going to die. That implies, by making simple calculation, that the pandemic will be worse than the Spanish fever of the 1910. The Spanish fever killed more people than the First World War. So the only thing that we knew how to do is to use technology from Middle Ages, lockdowns. And that's how we reacted to the thing. But this reaction seems not to be the right one. And secondly, was highly regressive. Because when they sent us to home with a lockdown, you and I, we open our computer and we keep working. The great majority of people of this world could not do that. You and I saw that our kids open their iPad and keep working. In Sub-Saharan Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, there are young kids that for 2 years they did not go to school, which will have a profound impact for the future of the world. In fact, the World Bank presents this data. Let's take, because it's closer, let's take the Latin American Caribbean. In 2019, if you ask a kid 10 years old in Latin American Caribbean, read this paper, tell me what you read, 50% didn't know what they just read, 50%. In 2022, you repeat that exercise, you give a 10 years old boy or girl 1 page to read, and 80% don't know what they read. So this is a profound impact that will suffer for the future of this pandemic. That's the first shock that we have since 2020 until now. Not so long ago. That's the first profound shock. How we respond to this shock? In economics, we don't know much. We know that if we have a problem, there are two ways to react to that problems. One is we take money from one group of people and we give that money to other group of people. We call that fiscal policy. No? We take from one guys and we give to other guys. Thanks to the financial sector, that is a time capsule, we can take money from people that are not adult. Meaning we sell bond 30 years. We just take money from our kids. And that's how we can take money for future generation. That we did that too. We took money from our kids. That's the first way to solve the problem. The second way is we print papers. People believe, oh, I have more papers, I'm richer, they spend more. We call that monetary policy. These are the two policies that we know how to do. We use both policies. Look at here the general government debt. In red, developing countries, in blue, advanced economies. You see the increase with the pandemic. The increase actually started in 2008 with the red, but you see the increase with the pandemics. This implies that after the pandemic, the debt of the government in advanced economies arrived to above 120%. What indication is that? None. The only thing that we see that the debt that we have today is larger than we have after the Second World War. So we are highly in debt. All the countries are highly, and the advanced economies are 120% of GDP. And then we can see that the emerging markets have 60% of GDP, the largest debt of the government at that time. This implies that we don't have enough policies if we have a new recession in the world, because we are over in debt at all levels. Look at the case of the United States. The United States today have a public debt that is above what the United States had at the end of the Second World War. So this is, again, a situation that's highly in debt. Fiscal policy, we use. Result, we are in debt today. The second way to attack this, print money. Here the amount of money that the central bank printed, no? And here we have the Fed, the Central Bank of the United States, the ECB, the Central Bank of Europe, the Bank of Japan, and the Chinese Central Bank. We don't have time to look, I'm going to concentrate in the Fed. Here is telling me the money supply of the Fed in 2007 was roughly 800 billion. And something happened here. That day is September 15, 2008. That day, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. The fellow that was in charge of the Fed, Mr. Bernanke, that won the Nobel Prize because of his actions here, he called the banks and said, do you have any paper in your balance sheet that you don't want? They say, yes, plenty of them. He said, I'll buy them. At what price? There's no market. How much did you pay? I pay the amount that you pay. So we went from September 2008 to the end of the year. Mr. Bernanke increased the quantity of money roughly 3.5 times. And then that's what we call quantitative easing one. Then he said, well, the problems are in the real estate sector. So I'm going to buy mortgage-backed security. Start buying mortgage-backed security. That's what we call quantitative easing two. Then the guy said, well, the government is spending money, is issuing bonds. I have to buy the government bonds. Quantitative easing three. So by 2016, the money supply in the United States went from 800 billions to 4 trillions. No, this is a huge increase of the money supply. And the other central bank did the same. But you see that when we arrive to 2018, 2019, this amount of money start to stabilize, and maybe they start to take it out, that thing. You see in the United States, the money is going out at 2019. Why? Because everybody thought, okay, we have a huge shock here, now it's time to take the money out. And then came the pandemic. What's happened when the pandemic came? This one. So this was the increase in the money supply when the pandemic came. That was the solution that we found. A tsunami of liquidity. A tsunami of money coming from the central bank, because that was the way to react. I will take the Bank of China here and include the Bank of Japan. Excuse me, include the bank, I will take just this and keep the other three, and you can see. In Lehman's, the sum of the money of these three central banks were roughly 4 trillions. By the time of the end of the pandemics, the money supply went to almost 30 trillion. That is the amount of money that we have in the world today, because most of this money has not been taken out. What was this money used on? To buy government bonds, to finance the deficit. That's why we have huge increase in deficit and we don't have very high interest rates. Because when the central bank start buying these bonds, they push down the interest rate. In the case of Germany, it's incredible. Mr. Draghi started buying bonds from all the countries of the European Union that they had deficit. They bought all of the members of the European Monetary Union, but Germany didn't have a deficit, so Germany was not issuing bonds. But for political reasons, he bought of all the member banks. So during 5 years, if you want to lend money to Germany at 30 years, you have to pay Germany because the interest rate were in negative terms. How much of this money we have taken out? Not that much. You see, that was increased. That is the one that we have taken out. Not that much money. This money is still in the system. Thanks to this money, this liquidity, it's what we have seen in S&P 500 and in other assets. No? We are in a world with a lot of money around, and that's how we see this huge increase in the stock market and all other things. So this is the result of the first shock was immediately a huge increase in debt, increase in liquidity. Then when we try to start again the world, because by the lockdown, implicitly what we did is to put the world in an induced coma. When we try to restart the world, it didn't start it again. We have bottlenecks. We have problems of supply side, and the prices start to increase. And then we have the second shock, the war in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine. What that implies? The price of commodity jump up. And then we start feeling inflation. No? We have that year of the invasion, the 2022, the invasion was at the beginning, a substantial increase in the prices of commodities, and then we have the inflation coming up. And here, where we are today, we are with high level of inflation created at the beginning, but mostly because of the shock of the war and the inability of the world of restarting, plus the fact that at this time China closed totally, that increase of the world, when the price of commodities start to decline, inflation started to decline, but it didn't decline enough. Why? Because we have a huge amount of money in the system. So in economics, we measure inflation in two ways. We measure total inflation that we call headline inflation, and another measurement of inflation, we call it core inflation. We take from this headline inflation commodities, essentially food, and energy. Why do we want to do this? To get out of the inflation all these shocks that might be created by wars or any type of things, and have the inflation with inertia. And here's the data on this. You see that today the core inflation is above the headline inflation everywhere. Why? Because this decline in the prices is because we have high prices of commodities and it's going down. What we have here is that still the inflation rate in the world is above what the central banks want, quote unquote. It's above the target that they have. What's the meaning of this? That we won't see pretty soon a decline on interest rate. Interest rate will continue to be above, because what is the relevant inflation rate is not the headline. What is the relevant inflation rate to measure this? It's the core one. It's the one that takes out all the noise that the commodity prices will make it. And we will be very difficult that we will have a substantial decline in the inflation of the world. Because we printed too much money. And inflation responds to the amount of money that we print. So check just the ECB. Here you see in 2020, the supply of money was 2 trillion. Even today, after the decline, the supply of money, it's 7 trillion. So we have 3 times the supply of money. And this is the elephant in the room. People that says that we are going to arrive soon to 2% inflation or a very low type of inflation, forget about this elephant in the room. This is the elephant in the room. This is the supply of money. This is what. Actually, I mentioned so many times the word elephant in the room in my classes and everything that I say, okay, I say, well, I'm going to draw an elephant in the room. So people will realize that this is the impact. This is what created inflation. And at least we take this money out, we won't have. And we don't take the money out. Still the money, it's in. What's happened to inflation rate? Substantial increase in inflation rate. Here you see the inflation rate of Japan is the only country that just lately have a positive nominal inflation rate. Now, when we talk about inflation rates, what is relevant is not the nominal one. What is relevant is the real interest rate. So it's not relevant how much money I have to pay. The relevant is how much I can buy with the money that I have to pay. No? And when you see the nominal, it seems that we have high interest rate in the world. But when you see the real, the panorama changed dramatically. Here you see Eurozone, no? Here is the policy rate, very high, 4%. But you see that the inflation rate, it's 3%. So the real interest rate in Eurozone, it's 1%. That is not a very contractive monetary policy. So you have to wonder why they don't increase more the interest rate. Why don't, if we want to stop inflation, why do we don't do this? Well, I will show you data in a moment. Why not? Why? Because if they do that, Spain, Italy, they will go bankrupt. We cannot do that. I will show you in a moment data of this. Here is the United States inflation. Again, you see there's a high rate of interest rate. But when you see the inflation, the real interest rate is roughly 1.5. And this happened with all countries, especially with Japan. Now, Japan has still a highly negative interest rate when you measure the difference between inflation and I can keep showing you later like this, but what's the meaning of all this? That still we have very low and not really contractionary monetary policy. Why we don't have contractionary monetary policy? Because of this. This is the debt, not only the public, but also the private debt in the world. Today, we owe roughly 250% the GDP. That's the amount that we owe. We are heavily in debt. We cannot increase interest rate just freely because the service of this debt will increase heavily. When you look at advanced economies, you can see with the financial crisis, the global financial crisis, roughly in the advanced economy, the debt was 250%. Today, we go to 300%. So this is the amount that what we owe. If you look at emerging markets, you have to take out of the picture China. Why? Because China is heavily in debt. Why? Because China, the growth of China in the last year has been building roads that nobody will use, bridges that nobody will cross, and houses that nobody will live in. So in order to do that, they have very high debt. And this is what you have to take China out of this. So here you see emerging markets, no? With China, without China, and with China. And you see the high level of debt. So because of this high level of debt, it's very difficult that we will have a substantial increase in interest rate, a substantial. When countries have high debt over GDP, they need to do something to adjust. How we can reduce debt over GDP? One way is to increase GDP, obvious. No, that grow more. That is one way. That's difficult these days. A second way, why don't you have austerity, a fiscal adjustment? It's very difficult today when we live in a world with high level of inequality created by this shock that we have a fiscal austerity in the countries. No? We will have some adjustment, yes. We will see adjustment in Europe, we will see adjustment in United States, we will see, yes. How will what this adjustment imply? More taxes. That's the way how we have adjustment. We will have an increase of taxes all over the world because we owe too much money. The other way to solve the problem of high debt over GDP is to have any default. No? I'm saying this not because I'm Chilean, but to act like Argentina. That will be the solution. I don't pay. Or to act like Icelandic. No, I don't pay. Can Europe do this? Can Spain do this? Can Italy do this? No, of course not. If that happened, say goodbye to the common currency. So they can. So what can we do if they cannot go bankrupt and Italy owes public debt 130% of GDP, Spain 110% of GDP? This is what the central bank is doing. This is what the central bank is doing. Mrs. Lagarde saying, we are adjusting the quantity of money. We are decreasing the quantity of money. Yes, they are doing it, but in a special way. They are selling the bonds that they have from the advanced economies, Germany, for example. When they sell the bonds that the central bank have, they are putting the bonds in the market and collecting euros. And what do they do with those euros? They buy the bonds of Italy and Spain in order to save them. If not, the system will go down. So this is what they are doing. We cannot have a solution if we just adjust. The last thing that we can do to eliminate debt is what we are going to do for some years, and we are doing today. We have a sudden burst in inflation and financial depression. I will explain what is this. We have an increase in inflation, and we don't have an increase in interest rate that mimic that increase in inflation. So we live in a world with very low or zero real interest rates. Why this is a solution? Because if I go to the bank and I borrow $100 and the bank tells me you have to pay me 10% at the end of the year, the 10%, $10 at the end of the year, that's the nominal interest rate that I pay. So I borrow 100 and I want to buy any good. Let's say I want to buy a beer with that 100 and the $1 one beer, I'm borrowing 100 beers. And at the end of the year, I will have to pay 110 beers, 10%. That's a real interest rate. But if throughout this period of time, from now until I pay, we have inflation, and the price of beer increased from $1 to $2, at the end of the year, I will pay back just 55 beers. That is an implicit default, no? That is an implicit default. And that's what we are doing. We are having implicit defaults. How? Having inflation, having low interest rate. That is how we are adjusting today. So it's very unlikely that we'll have a substantial increase in interest rate. It's very unlikely that we will go to 2% inflation in the core inflation in advanced economies. We will continue living with inflation. I'm a Latin American, so it's tough for me saying we're living with inflation when the inflation rate will be 4%. For us, 4%, it's peanuts. In Latin America, we have 40, 50, and nothing happens. But, well, we will live with 4% interest rate. inflation rate, that 4% will imply a decline in our debt. Since we started the printing of money in 2020 until now, the average inflation rate in United States, in United Kingdom, in Europe, in all advanced economies has been roughly 25%. That has been the decline of 25% of the debt. And that's how we are going to eliminate the process. That's how we're going to eliminate the process. And this will allow us to keep growing with some inflation and to solve the problems. What are the predictions then? This is IMF predictions, no? IMF said that the world will continue in the path that we have, and we will see a decline in the rate of growth of mostly Europe. Why that decline? Because due to the war, the core of Europe, that is Germany, is 34% of the European Union. Germany has to change the source of energy. They were linked, they were actually locked down with Russia due to the gas that were buying, and they have to find a new way to do it. Now, we in Europe, we say we don't buy any more energy from Russia. Well, we are buying from Russia. Why? Because the energy goes from Russia to India, and we buy to India. So that's how we do it. No, we buy liquid gas all from Russia to China, and we buy liquid gas and we are buying from China. So you can see there. Now, this rate of growth of China, I highly doubtful. It's that they are achieving that rate of growth. When you see the level of energy that they are using, they have to produce GDP in a weird way to the level of energy being in the same level of the GDP. There is another projection from Consensus Forecast. And you see here again that Euro area is the one that has with a smaller growth. No? One of the things that call attention here is that United States growing at that fast rate. Nobody understands that. People are saying something strange is happening there. What are the explanations for the high growth in United States? Are essentially 3 or 4. The first one is the fiscal deficit. They keep having a very high fiscal deficit. There's no adjustment in the fiscal deficit. That's the first one. The second one is that they have had a huge influx of immigrants. During the last 2 years, the government of Mr. Biden has allowed 9.5 million immigrants to the United States. And that has been a decline in the salaries in some sectors and the increase. And the third one, that might be a very nice one, is that we are living undergroundly. It's a high growth, yes, because the labor force in Japan is declining. The number of people that are able to work is declining. So Japan is a country where more diapers for old people are sold than diapers for babies. So they have an implosion in their labor force because so it's incredible that the country with this level of aging is having that type of thing. Among the emerging market, China, big question mark. China is not a problem only in the real estate. That is 30% of the economy, and it's a Ponzi scheme, essentially. It's a Ponzi scheme, the real estate process. But the problem that China has also is that in the coastal areas, the salaries today, the labor cost today in the coastal area in China, take any city in the coastal area, the labor cost is higher than the labor cost that you see in countries like Ciudad de Mexico, in cities like Ciudad de Mexico or Sao Paulo or whatever. So they cannot do more labor-intensive activities. They have to do things of the higher value added. And if they, where the labor intensive activities will be done in China, not in Shanghai, in Chongqing. But if I have to go to Chongqing to do labor intensive activities, better I go to Yunnan. So now now they have to compete with other for logistic and all that type of thing. So what do they need to do in the coastal area? They need to do things that require entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship is not something welcomed by the Communist Party. Where is Mr. Jack Ma today? We don't know. So when you live in a society where you cannot fail because the party won't allow you to fail, it's very difficult to have this process of entrepreneurship and growth. So the problem is not a problem of cycle because of the real estate, it's a more profound. It's a problem of that the country need to have entrepreneurs, and at least with the data that we have, we don't see entrepreneurship without freedom. And this is a very difficult aspect of the Chinese. Besides that, the one-child policy has implied that the labor force will start to decrease in 3 years from now. And also, roughly in China, 66% of the labor force are composed by people that have never gone to secondary education. So the level, although there is no illiterate, the level of education is not very high of that labor force and aging. So this is the big question mark if China will be able to surpass the middle income trap, which is most of the countries that grow fast, they face that. Then we have a case of India, and India is benefiting substantially because of the changes that the government is doing. India, and you know better than me, so I said please, I don't want to talk about India in front of experts because it will be silly, no? But tell me if I'm mistaken. What is the main export of India today? Zeros and one. That's what India exports. Exports zeros and one, which is an incredible thing. Why a country like India will export zeros and one? Well, because we don't have enough infrastructure. Because we have a regulation in the labor market that won't allow to have all these things. We have regulation upon crossing a state with all the things Mr. Modi's have been trying to, in their agenda, to fix it. Also, we have great subsidy for the agriculture sector. Also thing that he has trying to fix. So India is the most strange country in the history of development in the world. Because how we develop all the countries, including China, including the tigers that before China, including Japan, we go agriculture. After agriculture, we do labor-intensive activities. That jump from agriculture to labor-intensive activity imply a profound increase in productivity, especially in countries like India, where you don't have very productive because of climate and other things, type of agriculture. After labor-intensive activities, that meaning I make stuffed animals for Disney, I go and produce cars, and then after produce cars, I go to services, and in services, I go to financial services. That is the path of most of the country. You look at the path of the country. What percentage of the American economy is today services? More than 90%. Why? Because this process of growth. This is the process of growth. If you weight in tons, if you weight the GDP of the United States, it's much lighter today than at the beginning of the 19th century. Why? Because we went from industry to services. All the countries. India is a strange. What's the engine of growth of India is a highly educated small group of people that are at the service level. But 45% of the labor force is in agriculture. So need to go through that. But in order to go through that, we need to build that ladder. We need to build that step. And to build that step, we require infrastructure, we require deregulate market, etc. And that is it's not easy to achieve, and that in that path. But that's what India is doing today, and India is taking a big advantage. Take the case of Apple. What percentage of the phones are made in China? 100%. So how is Apple? Extremely scarce, because now we are in a cold war with China. How about if United States tomorrow the president say no more imports from China? Apple's go bankrupt. What is Apple doing? Let's go to India. Escaping from that thing, and that's a big. In the process of reshoring, in the process of changing the value chain of the world, there are two big winners. One is India, the other one is Mexico. These are the two big winners. And this is a huge opportunity. So in India, not only today's most populous country of the world, this year or next year will be the engine of the world. When you will see which country contribute to the global growth, China was until a few times ago. India will start being in a couple of 3 years from now, and that's the process of growth that we will see. Russia have all the problem that has all the problem name is Putin, and and that's why I have a low growth. But Russia, despite all the problems, has been growing much higher than what you expected to grow. Actually, Russia 3 months ago became the 5th economy of the world, surpassing Great Britain, and still growing in that sense. All this policy of not allowing Russia to export has benefited somehow Russia, because now Russia is not only commodity export, they are building domestic industry. And finally, we have Brazil. Brazil, there was a famous Charles de Gaulle phrase. Charles de Gaulle used to say, Brazil is a country with a great future and will continue to be a country with a great future. You know, and it applies especially now with Mr. Lula, that is increasing the fiscal deficit. This year, the fiscal deficit in Brazil will arrive at 90% of GDP. Brazil is not United States, so they will face big problem with that. Okay, very briefly, this is the situation in the short run. What is the situation in the long run? This is what we like to do in economics. In economics, we like to do supply and demand. We love this stuff. This is something that, so here I have price level and real GDP, and I have an aggregate demand and an aggregate supply. What is happening in the long run from now on? What we will have is that this aggregate supply is shifting to the left. So from now on, structurally, we will face lower growth in the world and higher prices. Why? Because of this. We have the time of globalization is over. Now we have a globalization. We will start, and you can see it in the first thing. We have an aging society. All over the world, we are not producing babies. Last year, if you look at United Nations projections, United Nations tell us that by 2100 we will be 10 billions. But last year, when you measure how many kids per woman we have at the world level, they were 2.28, 2.3. We need 2 to make 1, and that one has to arrive to adulthood. So that's 0.2, 0.3. So we are today in the world in a situation where just no growth of the population, was just replacing the one that are dying. And that is, so it's highly probable that we will never arrive to 10 billion, that we will stop before in this process. And that's an aging society that is a big problem for the world. There are countries like South Korea, that last year has 0.7 babies per woman. So that is a shrinking, that they are in a process of disappearing, no, because of that policy. This is another big advantage of India. India have a young, populous society that it's a source of ideas and consumption. The other problem that we have is climate change. We are having problems because we are essentially a fossil fuel society. We were talking this afternoon. I was saying that you read in the newspaper, no? Say Denmark last month fulfilled all the demand of energy with solar or with wind. No, that's you read in the newspaper. What the papers do not tell you that this was between noon to 12:05. No, that's a footnote that never tell. We are still a fossil society. It's impossible in the short run to replace fossil fuel. It's not only fossil fuel, the one that goes into the car. Look at here, concrete. What do we do with, where do we get concrete? CO2. Plastic. What is plastic? CO2. Steel. What is steel? CO2. Food. What is food out there? CO2. So this is impossible to replace this stuff. When the people say we are going to eliminate the CO2 emission by 2050, they are totally nuts. They don't have a clue what they are talking about. This is impossible to do it. There's no way that we can do that, no? Another thing that we have an increase in inequality. This inequality, it's mostly inequality within countries. It is inequality in our neighborhood. But the world has decreased inequality substantially. Why? Because China and India have grown at a higher rate than they what used to do. So inequality across country is decreasing. Inequality within country is increasing. When you make the net of inequality across country decreasing with inequality within country increasing, we are much more equal in this world than what we were 20, 30, 50 years ago. And we are eliminating poverty, another thing. But this inequality will require government expenditure, regulation, etc., etc. And finally, we have the Cold War, no? And I don't have time, so just for a second, I want to refer to that thing of the Cold War. This is trade over GDP. So this export plus import over GDP. Here in the 19th century, after the Napoleonic War, after the American Civil War, we start to increase trade in the world. And this was not trade only of goods and services, was also migration. 25% of Europe left Europe and went to America. Why? Because here in 1830, a boat from Liverpool to New York took almost a month and was extremely expensive. By 1890, it took 8 days, and in today's money, roughly 3,000 euros. So families were able to join forces and send people to America, no? Some of my great-grandfather, the guy jumped into a boat and went to America using this. He made a mistake. He stepped out in Valparaiso and not in San Francisco, but it's okay. We survive anyhow. But this 25% of Europe did this stuff. It's a good. And this ended in 1914. First World War. We have the Spanish fever. We have the Great Recession. We have the Second World War. And this one, we changed here after the Second World War. All the intellectual and the powerful people of this world, they met in a city in a town of New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. And there where United States appeared as a unipolar, as a boss of the world. Create the World Bank, the IMF, and we have this process of opening up. In 1980, with Deng Xiaoping, China entered to this. In 2001, China joins the WTO. In 1991, with the demise of the Soviet Union, India has to open because they don't have enough money to buy oil. And this is the process where we open up to. The thing ended in 2008. And now we are declining in this level of. So people call this the Cold War. The Americans write this type of books. This is a guy from the Kennedy School of Government. It was the favorite student of Mr. Kissinger. And the book say, look, there is an incumbent and there is a challenger. Whenever the challenger goes against incumbent, we have wars. So Mr. Graham Allison measured 16 cases where a new power challenged the old one, and these 16 ones, we see in 14 of them, we end up in open war. That didn't happen in the Cold War. So what Mr. Allison arguing is, we're going to war against China. But we have to keep this at the level of a Cold War, not an open war. So what we need to do, we need to go and forbid export of sensitive material to China. So 2 years ago, in a law called anti-inflation law, they say no more microchips to China. What Mrs. Janet Yellen said, why we are doing this? She said, look at the tanks, the Russian tanks. They cannot work because they are all technology. We want that China suffer the same thing. So they are using trade as a weapon. And that is the thing that... So they want the view to look at this as a Cold War between United States and Soviet Union. But it's not like this. First, China doesn't want, it's never wanted to impose his view of the world to other countries. It's not an expansionary power like the Soviet Union used to be. Okay, South China Sea, there are problems. Now they have a new base in Djibouti that they didn't have. It's the first base outside the country. But China is a trade with most of the countries, something that the Soviet Union didn't do. Here you have the countries that are the main trade partners of China. So we are in 1983. China started to open up. Which are the countries? Well, China, Mongolia, Yemen, not too many. And look, I do click here, and you see what's passing of time. Who are the countries that are made trainers? And the world have changed, dramatically changed since 1980. Since China opening up, this world has changed dramatically. And you can see that today, these are the main trade partners with China. So, if United States said to the world, you trade with me or with China, we will have a big problem in this world. And that's what the thing, because if United States want to say, if you want to use 5G, you have to use mine, not the Chinese one, we will see a big problem in there. A multinational will have to think on this because it's probable that that will be the issue. Okay, sorry, I stop here and see if there's any question. Sorry that I extended too much. Any comment or question? Welcome, please. I talked too much. Sorry. Yes?
In one of your slides, you showed the real GDP growth. And China from 17 to 19, 23, 24 and 25 was a constant decline.
Yes.
What's your outlook up to 2030?
Well, this is the outlook, because we will see this thing. We will see a bunch of policies that are shifting the aggregate supply to the left. So we will have lower growth and higher prices. And this will be a constant across country because all these problems that I mentioned, no? The Cold War, the globalization, the aging society, all the things that are now to the future being a negative impact. What will change this? What will change this if we have this movement? What can create this movement? Technology, artificial intelligence. And that is the underlying thing that might have a profound change in the. That is one of the reasons that might overcome the other one. So if nobody knows what will happen, especially I don't have a clue what will happen, but if you tell me what will be my assumption, that we will have 5 years, we will see on average lower growth in the world, and then we will see an incredible robust growth thanks to the new technologies. What is coming, it's substantially different what we had in the past, and we have huge positive effects and huge negative effects. All type of technological improvement, a great Austrian economist call it, these are creative destructions. So this technology will destroy many markets, will affect many people, but the net will be substantially positive.
With this AI, you think the growth will be exponential, but AI is going to create a generation of morons. So that will have a lot of impact on the world economy because of the losing of the jobs and everything. So many other things, the dynamics will change.
Yes, that's a problem of this. But the morons, it's okay. I don't use that. The problems we already have it. Meaning, if you look OECD countries, they are where we have data. That's what we have to look at OECD countries, no? And you go and see. Would you tell me which are the number of people younger than 29 that on average in countries do not work, do not study, and are not in training? We have tragedies. In South Africa, it's 50%. 50% of the people younger than 29 do not work, do not study, and not training. You say, well, but in advanced economy it should be different. Go to see Spain, 1 in 4. 25% of the young kids in Spain do not work. So what are we? We are bringing here a technological progress that in order to understand it, you need to have human capital. If you don't have education, you cannot manage this. In Spain, people say, we have to move out of, people come here only to the sun and to the beach, and we need to go a new type of growth. And the question to them is, growth, another new type of growth, nanotechnology, when 1 in 4 of your kids do not work, do not study, it's very difficult. So the problem, we have it. What the artificial intelligence will do is to make it even more clear that we face a huge problem of bad education among the labor force around the world. No? Yes, back. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we go just here and then we go back there. Yes.
Fascinating display of history and economics together. Yes. The question is, the last 4-5 months, we've been seeing a peculiar song and dance between the Fed and the economists. The interest rates were supposed to come down 3 times in 75 basis points to 150 basis points. And Powell keeps saying we'll be data-driven in our approach.
Yes.
And every month, inflation is stubbornly high, and it ought to be high because you've shown us that inflation cannot be low. So why this facade of if the inflation goes down, then we will bring down the interest rate? not going to go down at this rate.
No, they won't go down, and we will live with higher interest, with higher inflation for some time. Higher for the northern levels. No, that again, we will live, and that it's a welcome process. Why? Because we're eliminating debt. So that that's how we eliminated debt after the Second World War. The same process we will use now. So the Fed will say, "Oh, I'm looking at now this thing. I'm looking at that." The core inflation, the last 3 months, has been 4.4%, the highest level that we have in the last 2 years. So they won't decrease interest rate.
So there's this huge kidding of the masses happening.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's it, because if the explanation is quite cumbersome to do, but that's what they are going. It will happen, and the Fed, by the end of the year, might even increase interest rates. And what will happen? The boom that we see in the stock market, we know, only because 7 stocks. The rest is going down. There are 7 that are increasing. The rest is going down. So maybe we are risking the whole system to go down. So I don't know that, I doubt it that the Fed will do it, but the exceptional 7 that the people go are the ones that are pushing up the S&P 500. Yes. Yes.
In the 90s and 2000s, we saw a lot of so-called basket cases where the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank started putting severe restrictions on the quote-unquote developing countries, and that caused severe issues for them because they had to restructure, they had to constrict themselves. India, Argentina, so many cases. We saw all that, and they are like unprotected because their cases are for the world to see. But when it comes to Europe, Portugal, Italy, and you yourself said so that there's a lot of couching because all these so-called basket cases of the European countries which are going down, but which they call them by sophisticated names like haircut and all those things, and they are protected by the bigger partners inside Europe. So, I mean, given that disparity, is there a bubble waiting to burst? I need your opinion.
Yes. Well, the bubble was that we had before in the bonds. Now, what we need to do now is to keep countries like Spain, countries like Italy, countries like Greece, countries like France. France doesn't want to belong to this group, but belong to this group alive. And why do we need to do that? Because the European Monetary Union and the European Union, it's a political project. It's not an economic project. What these things try to do is to avoid the history of Europe of last century. There's nothing to be proud about the history of Europe of last century. They kill each other. They have awful policies to some specific groups, and we don't want to live that way. We don't want that the world will be like that. Sorry to bring a personal story here. My parents met in 1958 in Poland. Why they met in Poland? 2 young Chileans met in Poland because they were both members of the Communist Party. So in Poland that year, in 1958, was a meeting of the communist youth, and they met there. So every year that I remember, when my friends were in Chile going to the beach in the summertime, January, February, I was there in Poland with flowers to the unknown soldiers. Then I will go to the Red Square with flowers to Yuri Gagarin, flowers to Lenin. That's how I grew up. No, and they used to tell me, hey, this guy will never enter here. Here you see the Nazis, and they confuse everything. The Nazis will never enter. The capitalism will never enter. When you go into when you go into Moscow, at that time they were the trenches, and my mother will stop the car and say, Pedro, you're a little guy, but look how close we were from the Red Square. This will never happen. Well, I became a bad son with the years, because I used to stop in the same trenches when I used to go to Moscow, and if you get the right angle, behind you will see a McDonald's and an IKEA, and I will send picture to my mom and say, hey, the good guy wants, look, the good guy wants. So that I was not very nice as a son, no, for them. But why I'm telling this story? Because now, we at the ESO, we have programs in Poland. I go there 3-4 times per year. Downtown Poland, the Sheraton. You come out of the Sheraton, there is a square. Beside the Sheraton, you know what the store that is there? Hugo Boss. This guy made the uniforms. I look up and I see a big sign of Volkswagen. This guy made the tanks. This guy, and we live in peace. This is an incredible achievement. So if I evaluate the project by economic sense, it doesn't pay. But if I evaluate this project as how we will live in a continent in peace, I'm willing to pay any money out of this, because this is a huge change from last century. And our European, and now I'm speaking like a European, no? Our European authorities, they know that, and that's why Germany is willing to subsidize these countries. Because that is the only way to live in peace, and that is a project. It's a political project that we're having there. Yes.
It's a fantastic display of history as well as the future. One of the points which you talked about is climate change as a negative shock, right? What is the impact of climate change on food and water across these geographies and across economies affecting inflation? Do you have anything about that?
Well, the impact of climate change is different in different places of the world, no? The problem of climate change is that it's a political issue and very difficult to solve. Why? Because the rich guys, they tell countries like India, hey, you cannot issue more CO2. Why you cannot say? Because we have a problem. And what is the problem? That this is the level of particles that we have today, therefore these are the particles. We are way above what we have in pre-industrial level. We are in 460. That implies that today we have an increase in the temperature 1.5 degrees compared to the pre-industrial. That will create problem. So India asks, and what created this problem? Who created this thing? And the answer is the rich. So these are the rich countries asking countries that want to be rich, you cannot be rich. And that is very difficult, because when you see the emission of CO2 in 1800, 1850, these are the rich countries. They created this effect. Who will maximize this effect? China, India, and all the rest. But they created it. So this is a... So what is the impact this one on... The impact will be very different in different regions. Let me just 1 second and I show you a map that will tell you. Of the CO2 and put it together in a meta study, and here you see. So by the end of this century, people will be able to drink wine from Siberia. You see? But my below countries will be underwater, maybe. So it's a different impact on different regions. There's no a unified impact of this. And depends where you are, it's where it is. Now, when you read the IBPC, they say, Chile, be careful. Vietnam, be careful. Sub-Asia, Sub-China Sea, be careful. Because when the rise of the sea level, you will be in trouble. But you don't see in the IPCC that they say, Manhattan, be careful. Manhattan is below the level. You don't see that Netherlands, be careful. What's the difference between Vietnam and Manhattan? One is rich, the other is poor. So you have to become rich to solve the problem. But in order, how you will become rich? You have to use energy. And what the type of energy is the cheap one? So that implies that this is not very easy problem to solve, because we will keep using, despite the fact that we will keep using fossil fuel. If you don't take in consideration the fat tails, I mean, if you don't assume that we might have extreme event with high probability, what is the impact of all this? No? Well, we know first that we need to become rich. Second, we want to be like Manhattan. This is the proposed wall that they are building now for almost 800 billion. That's what they are building. We want to do the same that they do. What will be the impact of all this? Here are, again, my friend Thomas Kahn that wrote this book, that study. Here we have impact on GDP. Here we have temperature. If we do business as usual, if we don't do anything, they estimate that we will arrive somewhere here, 3.2 to 3.6 degrees. What's the impact of this? Well, there you see the estimate of Mr. Richard Nordhaus. Richard Nordhaus won the Nobel Prize of Economics to do this measurement. So it's between 5% to 15% on average. That's the impact, no, that we will have in the world. This, again, without assuming fat tails, because if there is fat tails, it's another problem, but without disaster. No, that is it. So what will be the impact of this stuff in those conditions? Last year, the world GDP was 130 trillions. That was the last year the world GDP. If we assume that the world GDP will grow at 2% per year, by 2100 the world GDP will be roughly 764 trillions. If we assume that it's a low growth, 2%, but let's assume, what will be the impact of 5% loss in GDP? Peanuts. This is not it's an important problem, but it's not why? Because when we will be in 2100, instead of having the GDP of 2100, we'll have the GDP of 2097. What will happen if 15% equally peanuts? It's not a substantial problem that we are facing. It's a deep problem, but it's not the problem of life and death. Why? Because all these studies don't assume the fat tail. Now, how do we know then if there is a fat tail or not? We cannot know, because this one is not risk that we are facing. Because when you face risk, you know the distribution of probability. Here we don't know the distribution of probability. So how do the people do studies if we don't know the distribution? Well, they invent it. They have their priors. That's how we do it, no? Because this is uncertain. This is uncertain. This is not risk. So there are people that invent the distribution with fat tails. There are people that... Who is right? We don't know. We don't know who is right. We will know in 2100. So that's the impact of this. But it's a big problem, but it's not a substantial problem that we are facing. It's under the economic view of the thing. If you believe that, if you are with Greta, we are in big problems. Any other? Yes.
What on selfish interest? Very fascinating, very interesting. In the Middle East, how does it affect all of us? Because we are in a very unique position. We have fossil fuels, we have the sun. We have money, it's a rich, rich countries. But at the same time, inflation pinches. So, where are we going?
Well, in the Middle East is incredibly diverse. No, countries like Dubai it's a source where we will see investment coming because of stability, and we are seeing that. So they have high growth, and this will be something, and will benefit, and it's hedge, because if we have problem, the price of oil will go up. So it's have a hedge type of growth. No, that is a benefit. That's why when you see what people are proposing for growth of this region, it's very high compared to other regions of the world. So what is happening then in some? You see, these are the 2024 high growth. Substantially high, above all the country, and for high level of development. What's happened with the other issues? The current war between Iran and Israel. That's a proxy war. That's what the Americans want. Not an open war. Let's have proxy war. And they want that. That's the book saying we need to have proxy war, but don't go head to head. So we have what are proxy war? Ukraine. This conflict here, Sahel, that's in Africa. That's another proxy war. South China Sea can become a proxy war. Is a proxy war the invasion of China of Taiwan? No, that's an open war. There is a line. But the other, we will see more proxy. Venezuela is a proxy war. That is another place because the Chinese are controlling the oil, and now they want to go into Guyana because Guyana has it. So these are proxy wars. The view is that these proxy wars are better than an open war. Well, in the second half of the 20th century, more people die in proxy war than during the Second World War. Died people in Vietnam, in Laos, in Cambodia, in Angola, in Cuba, in El Salvador. If you add up all those people that lie in all these proxy wars, more people die. So from the perspective of the American, it's better. But I'm not sure that from the perspective of guys from the third world like I am, that's a better outcome. But that's what we will live with more of this proxy war today.
How many slides do you have in this?
1,058.
Any spontaneous question is being answered from the slides from the presentation.
Yeah, okay.
That presentation where we saw from centuries ago, and then we came to the pandemic 2020, and then the past, and then where the world economy is going. I want to ask a question that how do you see cryptocurrency and digital economies impact all the original because entire thing is coming up, summarizing somewhere or the other, interest rate and inflation. So how does the digital economy, the cryptocurrencies as coming up, whether it is balancing the two, or what is the role of cryptocurrency?
Okay. They cannot use them to transactions. Why? Because they cannot be escalated. So if you use Bitcoin can do roughly between 17 to 20 transactions per second, which is nothing. And that number of transactions will be declining. Why? Because the genius Japanese guy that designed the algorithm, we want to end up with an inelastic supply. So it's becoming more and more difficult to solve the problems. Therefore, it's slowing down the speed of that. So Bitcoin and others are a digital gold and not a digital currency. Therefore, it helps you to, like gold is doing, when you see inflation coming, you can go to those things to use it as reserve of value, but cannot be used as way to have transactions. Now, what's the problem with some of these, including Bitcoin? If you look at correlation of them with the stock market, it's pretty high. So it's not a good hedging asset. It will be nice, it will have, but it's not a good hedging asset because a high correlation with the rest of the thing. So who will use this thing? People that have belief on this, libertarians and all that type of thing, and people that live in Venezuela, in basket cases, no, in Belarus, in Zimbabwe, all high. I prefer to have this than nothing. No, that's a way how we move away. What is coming though, what will be the big change in the next years, will be the fiat money that will be a currency like what's the word? It's a fiat money that will, instead of having papers, we will have a virtual one, of virtual fiat money. Yes, that is the word that I was. So what will be this? That there we have a profound and deep problem of how we will trust the authority. Because the authority will know everything about you. In Spain, when somebody comes to fix your home, the bathroom, let's say, leaking and all that thing, when the guy is going to leave, we have always the same conversation, and many countries of the world do the same thing. The guy will ask you, how are you going to pay me? I say cash, room. That means that we are fooling the system. We go to the underground economy because that doesn't have any transaction, no taxes. That's it. With that money, the virtual currency, fiat money, all those things are ended. The central bank will know everything that you do. The central bank can look at me and say, Pedro, you are too fat, no more carbohydrate. Your currency won't buy our carbohydrate. Or will do what the Chinese are doing. You're a bad citizen. You cannot travel. Your money cannot do this. Your money cannot do that. So this will be a profound change in the way that. And the thing, not only we have changes with respect to this, but the banking system will be useless. I will have my account with the central bank. The central bank can provide me everything that I needed. So this will be a profound impact also in the financial sector. But this is a big change that is coming. Finland will adopt it. China will already have it. China give you, I think that it's equivalent to $50 to have your small pocket that doesn't measure where you spend your money. So that is a small pocket that you can have without the government knowing. But the government in China knows everything where you spend your money, all the things. So that is and this is a big change that is coming. We don't know if country will accept it. I hope that they won't do it. And that's an issue that I'm willing to go to street to manifest to stop that thing, because that we are going to the big brother idea, and that will be very dangerous for the world. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pedro, for the wonderful session. May I now request Dr. Sahitya Chaturvedi and Mr. Lakshmanan to come up on stage to facilitate His Excellency Abdullah Al-Saleh, Under Secretary, Ministry of Economy, Shri Yatin Patel, Consul General.
But jokes aside, I think it was an excellent disposition. After attending university in the early 80s, today I felt like a university student again. Yeah. So thank you, Professor. Every thought, every slide had so much meaning in it, and we could relate to it. All of us from different walks of life, I could see the rapt attention throughout the room. And after a long day's work, on the first working day after a long holiday as well. Despite all odds, and your sense of humor, sir, it was fantastic.
we never knew when the humor is coming, and we had to catch it whenever it came. And that last bit about the Orwellian central bank digital currency was just too good. And we all hope it never comes. Otherwise, that's the end to personal freedom entirely. Yeah? But thank you again for taking the time and coming here. And I suppose you probably know Iter Alexpe. Do you know him? He's your fellow Chilean, also introduced by Lakshman many years ago from the same course. Well, thank you all from the audience, I think IBPC members and ICSI members as well. It's a great joint meeting, two organizations coming together, and that too to learn a subject that is often scoffed but very necessary for our existence and our future. The way you explained how we borrow from the next generation, how governments rob Peter to pay Paul, as between rich and poor people and rich and poor countries. These things we'll carry with us for a long time. Yeah. Thank you again. Dinner is served. Good night.